Daniel Cross, a man forged in the crucible of wilderness and tempered by personal tragedy, sought the profound silence of Deadroot National Forest, specifically its forbidden Sector 13. At 34, an ex-wildlife photographer turned survivalist. He was no stranger to solitude, often seeking its stark embrace to escape the lingering phantom of his brother's death, a hiking accident for which guilt still gnawed at his soul. He was a rational man, skeptical of the supernatural, yet the weight of his past made him emotionally fragile, a vulnerability he desperately tried to outrun. Late autumn had painted the Pacific Northwest in hues of rust and gold, but within Sector 13, the light struggled to penetrate the dense, untouched canopy. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, which crunched under Daniel's boots with every deliberate step. Days were short, the sun a fleeting visitor, and nights promised long, cold stretches, perfect for the kind of deep introspection Daniel craved, or so he told himself. His initial days in Sector 13 were a balm. The forest's quiet was absolute, broken only by the rustle of unseen creatures or the distant cry of a hawk. He set up a lean-to near a forgotten, overgrown trail, its faint outline hinting at past human presence, now reclaimed by nature. Area was known for strange disappearances, a detail Daniel had dismissed as local superstition, a morbid curiosity rather than a genuine concern. As dusk bled into the first night, a full moon, eerily bright, began to cast long skeletal shadows through the bare branches. Daniel lit a small, contained fire, its warmth a comforting counterpoint to the encroaching chill. He cooked a simple meal, the crackle of the flames the only sound in the vast expanse of the woods. This was the peace he had yearned for, a raw, untamed solitude that promised to quiet the voices in his head. But as the fire dwindled to embers, the forest's true nature began to assert itself. A faint whisper, barely audible above the gentle sigh of the wind, seemed to weave through the trees. It wasn't the sound of leaves or animals. It was too deliberate, too rhythmic, like hushed conversations just beyond his campsite. Daniel, ever rational, attributed it to the wind playing tricks, a byproduct of his heightened senses in the deep wilderness. He tried to ignore it, pulling his sleeping bag tighter, but the sensation of being watched intensified. He felt eyes on him, not the curious gaze of wildlife, but a predatory, intelligent scrutiny that prickled his skin. He scanned the impenetrable darkness beyond the firelight, his hand instinctively reaching for the hunting knife at his side. A knot of unease tightening in his stomach, the whispers grew bolder, closer, weaving in and out of the wind's mournful song. They were indistinct, fragmented, but the tone was undeniably alluring, a soft, hypnotic murmur that seemed to promise understanding, or perhaps oblivion. Daniel's heart quickened. This was no mere wind. This was something else, something that resonated with a primal fear he hadn't felt since. Since the accident, he spent the rest of the night in a state of hyper-alertness, his ears straining, his eyes darting into the oppressive darkness. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. The comforting silence he had sought had transformed into a suffocating presence, a vast unseen entity that seemed to breathe with the forest itself by dawn. Exhaustion had set in, but sleep offered no true rest. His dreams were a chaotic swirl of shadowy figures, and the insistent, fragmented whispers, always just beyond his grasp. He woke with a cold sweat, the feeling of being watched lingering like a phantom touch. Convinced he heard faint, distant murmurs carried on the wind, too soft to decipher. Yet undeniably, present Daniel tried to dismiss it all as the effects of isolation and the natural anxieties of deep wilderness camping. But as he packed his gear, the unsettling feeling persisted, a cold dread that clung to him like the morning mist. Sector 13, with its untouched beauty, now felt subtly off-kilter, like a beautiful painting with a single disturbing brushstroke he couldn't unseen. The whispers lingered, a chilling promise of what was to come. The second night brought the whispers again, precisely as the moon climbed to its zenith, their insidious rhythm weaving through the ancient trees. This time, Daniel was awake, waiting, his rational mind poised to dissect the anomaly. But the sounds were no longer indistinct murmurs. They were voices, a chorus of hushed tones, sometimes barely audible, sometimes startlingly close, like someone breathing directly into his ear, whispering his name. His scientific skepticism, once his fortress, began to show cracks. He spent the next day meticulously reviewing his campsite, searching for any logical source: wildlife, peculiar wind currents, even other campers. Every plausible explanation evaporated, leaving only the unsettling reality of the unexplained. The forest's peculiar atmosphere persisted, a collective tension that hummed beneath the surface of the rustling leaves. A silent hum of dread, driven by a growing need for answers. Daniel decided to push deeper into Sector 13, hoping to find a source, a logical explanation for the phenomena. He followed a barely discernible game trail, leading him into denser, more overgrown sections of the woods. The trees here seemed older, their branches gnarled and twisted, forming a perpetual twilight that even the midday sun struggled to pierce. It was here that he found them, animal bones, scattered and bleached, not just a few but dozens forming strange, almost deliberate patterns on the forest floor. Deer, elk, even what looked like the remnants of a bear all picked clean, their skeletons arranged in unsettling spirals and concentric circles. A primal fear stirred within Daniel, a realization that this was not the work of natural predators. As He examined the bones. The whispers intensified, now weaving in and out of his own thoughts, insidious and seductive. They began to sow seeds of doubt about his past, twisting his brother's accident in something more sinister, more deliberate. "You could have saved him," a voice would hiss, just as he tried to rationalize the bone patterns. "You chose not to," another would suggest, preying on his deepest guilt. His paranoia began to bloom, a dark flower in the fertile ground of fear and isolation. He found himself watching the trees, scrutinizing every shadow, every shift in the light. Was that a flicker of movement in the dense undergrowth? Did the rustle of leaves sound less like wind and more like footsteps? The entity, whatever it was expertly exploiting his deepest, most buried anxieties about responsibility and loss. Daniel's own sleep became a battleground. Vivid, disturbing visions plagued him, the forest floor teeming with shadowy figures, their forms merging with the gnarled roots of the trees. He saw faces he knew, distorted and grotesque, their eyes hollow. The line between dream and reality blurred, making him question his own sanity, making him doubt every perception, every memory. He tried to leave, to head back towards the known trails, but the forest seemed to resist. Paths he remembered vanished, replaced by impenetrable thickets. His compass spun erratically, his GPS signal flickered and died. The trees themselves seemed to shift, their branches forming an impassable wall, guiding him deeper into the heart of Sector 13, away from any hope of escape. The whispers, now a constant insidious chorus, had intensified their assault. They no longer merely suggested. They mocked, they taunted, they dug into the deepest recesses of Daniel's mind, dredging up every past insecurity, every forgotten slight. "You belong here," a voice would sneer, just as he tried to force his way through a thorny bush. "You always have." As the fourth night approached, Daniel felt a growing dread. The whispers were no longer just sounds. They were a presence, a key turning in a lock, opening something ancient and terrifying within Deadroot Forest. His rational mind, once so resolute, now felt like a fragile shield against an encroaching tide of madness. The whispers were louder, clearer, beckoning him towards a truth he was terrified to uncover, a truth that promised only oblivion. The fourth night brought not just whispers, but a palpable cold that seeped into Daniel's bones, despite his efforts to maintain a roaring fire. The air itself felt heavy, thick with an unseen presence that pressed in on his campsite. The whispers were a cacophony now, 1,000 voices screaming his name, tearing at the fabric of his mind, twisting his deepest fears into grotesque realities. His brother's accident, the very reason he sought this solitude, became the entity's most potent weapon. Visions of the fateful day, of the choices he had made, played out before his eyes with horrifying clarity. Each detail magnified, each moment of guilt amplified. The whispers accused him, condemned him, until he found himself curled on the forest floor, sobbing, convinced of his own unforgivable culpability. His rational mind, his survival instincts, crumbled under the relentless assault, leaving him exposed and vulnerable, a raw nerve in the heart of the woods. The forest, too, descended further into its shared delusion. Daniel ventured out, desperate for any sign of a way out, but found only a disturbing tableau. Trees seemed to shift, their gnarled branches forming new, impassable barriers. The ground itself felt alive, roots snaking and twisting, almost guiding him deeper, away from any familiar landmarks. The air hummed with an unnatural energy, a low thrumming that resonated in his chest. He stumbled upon an abandoned ranger tower, its skeletal frame reaching towards the moon. It was a relic, a testament to past attempts at control, now reclaimed by the forest. As he approached, he saw faint, almost imperceptible etchings on its decaying wood. Crude drawings of figures with vacant eyes, their forms merging with the roots of trees, their mouths open in silent screams. A cold dread ran down his spine, chilling him to the bone. The whispers intensified inside the tower, no longer just external, but merging with his own internal monologue, making it impossible to distinguish his thoughts from the entity's insidious suggestions. "You belong here," they hissed. "Join us, become one with the roots." He saw glimpses of shadowy figures in the corners of his vision, too quick to be real, yet undeniably present, beckoning him deeper into the forest's embrace. Daniel tried to reason with himself, to cling to the last vestiges of his sanity, but his words were met with blank stares from the unseen presences, or dismissive murmurs that echoed his own deepest fears. His reality was shifting, his perceptions warped by the constant, insidious influence of the forest. He believed in the sleepers, in the waking, in the strange rituals he now felt compelled to perform, his face alight with a disturbing conviction. His survival gear, once his trusted allies, now seemed useless. His compass spun wildly, his GPS signal was dead, and his attempts to light a fire yielded only damp wood and smoke. The forest was not a physical barrier. It was a psychic one, a force that preyed on the very essence of consciousness, a predator of the mind, trapping him in its vast green labyrinth. The forest, once his sanctuary, became a place of torment. The ancient trees groaned not with the wind, but with unseen presences. Shadows writhed in the corners, and the whispering wind through the branches seemed to carry the distorted voices of his past, calling to him, inviting him into the shared delusion that was consuming Deadroot Forest, a place swallowed by its own dark history. Daniel's own thoughts began to fragment, his memories blurring, his sense of self eroding. He found himself staring blankly at his reflection in a still pool of water, unsure of the face staring back. The whispers, no longer just external, began to merge with his own internal monologue, making it impossible to distinguish his thoughts from the entity's insidious suggestions. A terrifying echo chamber of madness. As the sixth night approached, Daniel knew with a chilling certainty that he was lost. The forest was a collective nightmare, a living embodiment of madness, and he, despite his survival training, was being inexorably drawn into its terrifying embrace. The whispers were not just sounds. They were a siren song, luring him deeper into the abyss of shared delusion, a point of no return from which no one had ever returned. The sixth night brought a profound transformation to Sector 13. The whispers were no longer just a cacophony. They were a unified chorus, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very ground beneath Daniel's feet. The air thickened, not with mist, but with a swirling, almost visible darkness that seemed to emanate from the ancient trees themselves. Daniel, his mind fractured, stumbled through the woods, drawn by an irresistible, terrifying compulsion towards the heart of the forest. The forest floor was no longer just earth and leaves. It was a pulsating, organic mass. Roots, thick as python. Coils writhed and intertwined, forming grotesque patterns that seemed to mimic the scattered bone arrangements he had found earlier. The skeletal remains of animals were now embedded within these roots, their forms absorbed, their essence seemingly consumed by the living earth. Daniel pushed through the dense undergrowth, his own mind a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts and fragmented memories. The whispers were a roar now, urging him to join the others, to embrace the truth that the forest had revealed. He saw fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures, their forms indistinct, their movements slow and deliberate, merging with the very trees around them, their faces contorted by a shared, horrifying ecstasy. As he reached what felt like the epicenter of Sector 13, a clearing where the trees grew impossibly tall and ancient, a horrifying realization dawned on him. The ground was not just disturbed, it was excavated, revealing a network of vast subterranean tunnels, their entrances choked with gnarled roots. And from these tunnels, not bodies, but skeletal hands, long and impossibly thin, were slowly, deliberately reaching upwards, their bony fingers twitching, beckoning to the living, the ancient hunger Silas had spoken of in Eleanor's story. The one that fed on the unraveling of human minds was not a metaphor, it was real. The whispers were not just sounds. They were an awakening, a psychic pulse that stirred the long dead, parasitic entities buried beneath deadroot forest, entities that fed on the sanity of the living, drawing them into a collective delusion that made them willing participants in their own demise. Their minds consumed as the full moon reached its zenith, casting long, grotesque shadows. The skeletal hands began to pull themselves free from the earth, their movements slow, deliberate, and horrifyingly purposeful. They were not seeking to harm. They were seeking to merge. The shadowy figures, now clearer, revealed themselves to be the absorbed forms of past victims, their faces alight with a terrifying joy. Reaching out, offering their hands, their bodies, their very minds to the skeletal forms, embracing their oblivion. Daniel watched in frozen horror as a skeletal hand, impossibly thin and cold, reached out from the earth directly at his feet, its bony fingers beckoning, promising a horrifying peace. His brother's face flashed in his mind, then faded, replaced by the serene, blank expressions of the merging figures around him. The guilt, the trauma, the fear, it all began to recede, replaced by a strange, compelling calm. He screamed, a sound that was swallowed by the collective, joyful murmurs of the merging forms. He stumbled backward, away from the reaching hand, away from the horrifying truth of Deadroot Forest. But as he fled, a new chilling sensation crept over him. The whispers in his mind were gone, replaced by a single deep, resonant hum, echoing not from the forest, but from within his own skull. Daniel ran, not towards escape, but deeper into the forest, his steps no longer frantic, but strangely deliberate. The trees no longer seemed to block his path. They welcomed him, their branches parting to reveal new, unseen trails. He was free of the madness, but he was not alone. The forest had found a new host. He found himself at the base of a colossal, ancient tree, its roots thick as buildings, its canopy blotting out the moon. He reached out, his hand touching the rough bark, and felt a profound connection, a sense of belonging he had never known. The hum inside his skull resonated with the tree's ancient pulse. He was no longer Daniel Cross, the haunted survivalist. He was a part of the forest now, another set of eyes, another pair of ears, another voice in the endless whispering chorus, waiting for the next lost soul to wander into Sector 13.